Where Eagles Dare was not just a World War II adventure, it was a blizzard of espionage, violence, and deception wrapped in the most dangerous production ever attempted in the Alps. What looked like effortless heroism on screen was a near-death experience behind the camera, with real cliffs, real snow, and real danger. These are 20 weird facts about Where Eagles Dare, secrets that will make you see this movie in a whole new light. Fact number 20. The production of Where Eagles Dare began in real snowstorms. The crew filmed in Austria's Zugspitze region, where temperatures dropped to -20 degrees. The snow was so deep that vehicles froze solid overnight. Helicopters couldn't land on schedule, and Richard Burton's face swelled from frostbite. The script demanded constant night shoots, turning the mountain into a deadly stage. Many stuntmen refused to continue after several near falls. Yet director Brian G. Hutton pushed forward, insisting realism could only come from real ice and altitude. No soundstage could match it. What audiences didn't know was that behind those flawless action scenes, half the cast was suffering frostbite, exhaustion, and dehydration. It wasn't acting. It was survival disguised as cinema. Fact number 19. Clint Eastwood almost didn't take the role of Lieutenant Schaffer. He was exhausted after The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and told his agent he was done with war movies. But MGM offered him double pay and promised limited dialogue. Ironically, that made his character even cooler. Eastwood later joked he spoke fewer lines than bullets fired. What fans didn't see was the actor's quiet frustration. He disliked the endless retakes Burton demanded. He felt the dialogue was too British and the missions absurdly complex. But once he saw the rough cuts, he changed his mind. The minimalist lines made Schaffer mysterious, a perfect counterpart to Burton's intense performance. What began as a paycheck gig turned into one of his most iconic roles before Dirty Harry even existed. Fact number 18. The cable car fight sequence remains one of the most dangerous action scenes ever shot without modern safety rigs. Stuntman Alf Joint performed the mid-air brawl standing on real gondolas suspended thousands of feet above a ravine. There were no nets, no green screens, only freezing wind and slippery metal. During one rehearsal, a prop knife slipped, cutting his glove open. Eastwood himself climbed onto the roof for close-up shots without telling insurance representatives. Director Brian Hutton was furious, but Eastwood insisted the audience would know the difference. They were right. The scene terrified test audiences who swore it had to be fake. What they didn't know is that every scream of wind and sway of the gondola was completely authentic, and one mistake away from disaster. Fact number 17. Richard Burton was battling alcoholism during filming. He drank heavily between takes, forcing the crew to schedule his close-ups early before his hands began to tremble. His co-star, Clint Eastwood, later said Burton could transform instantly from half asleep to razor-sharp when the cameras rolled. Producer Elliot Kastner once found him asleep in a snowbank moments before an action scene. Yet Burton's commanding voice and cold composure made his Major Smith unforgettable. The contrast between his chaotic personal state and his calm on-screen presence became part of the film's hypnotic power. What audiences never realized was that every time Burton lit a cigarette or narrowed his eyes, it wasn't just character acting. It was a man fighting to stay upright against both the elements and his own demons. Fact number 16. The film's famous phrase, broadsword calling Danny Boy, wasn't in the original script. It was an improvised line during a communication test on set. Richard Burton added it while joking through his radio rehearsal. Director Hutton loved the rhythm and kept it. The line became the movie's heartbeat, repeated through moments of tension and chaos. Military radio operators worldwide later adopted it as slang. What began as a throwaway moment of humor became cultural code for impossible missions. Fans repeated it in bars and barracks for decades. Burton's delivery turned a simple radio call into one of the most quoted lines in British war cinema history. It was not scripted. It was lightning caught on tape. Fact number 15. Explosives used during filming were real military-grade charges. The special effects team underestimated their power during the castle assault sequence. When the detonation went off, the blast shattered windows across a nearby village and blew camera lenses off their mounts. Clint Eastwood dove behind a snowbank to avoid flying debris. Director Brian Hutton refused to cut the take. He yelled, "Keep rolling," as smoke engulfed the set. The resulting footage looked so authentic that MGM executives thought it was miniature work. What audiences never knew was that half the crew's eardrums rang for days afterward. The snow reflected sound like a thunder chamber, turning the mountain into an echoing cannon. Those explosions weren't Hollywood tricks. They were raw shockwaves captured forever on film. Fact number 14. The castle seen in the film wasn't a full structure. It was a clever blend of location shots at Hohenwerfen Castle in Austria and intricate miniatures built back in England. The aerial establishing shots were filmed from helicopters flown dangerously close to the cliffside. One pilot misjudged his altitude and clipped a tree branch, causing his rotor to stall briefly before regaining lift. The crew watched in silence, expecting the helicopter to crash. After that near-disaster, insurance agents restricted aerial filming to only 2 flights per day. The illusion worked so well that many believed the crew had full access to a mountain fortress. What audiences didn't know was that the castle wasn't conquered at all. It was stitched together from daring flights and brilliant model work. Fact number 13. The snow made sound recording nearly impossible. Every footstep crunched so loudly that the audio team had to re-record almost every line in post-production. The cold froze microphones solid and cracked their casings. To keep sound gear working, assistants wrapped recorders in blankets and carried them under their coats like infants. Even so, the playback was distorted by the wind. Clint Eastwood later said he had to dub nearly all his dialogue in a London studio months after shooting. That meant recreating every breath, every gunshot echo, and every footstep from memory. Viewers thought the cold silence was atmospheric. In truth, it was necessity. The mountain swallowed every sound except the howling wind, making silence one of the film's uncredited characters. Fact number 12. The screenplay was written by Alistair MacLean specifically for the screen not adapted from his novel. MGM wanted a fast production to capitalize on the spy craze of the late 60s. MacLean wrote the entire script in only 6 weeks while battling the flu. He later turned it into a novel after filming had already begun. The rushed timeline caused multiple continuity errors that editors had to hide through creative cuts. Dialogue was rewritten daily as new scenes were added. Even Burton joked that no one really understood the mission after page 90. Yet the confusion added mystery. The audience felt the same disorientation as the spies on screen. What began as a rushed assignment became one of the sharpest war thrillers ever written. Fact number 11. Clint Eastwood fired so many blanks during production that his ears bled from the noise. The castle set echoed like a drum. Even with earplugs, the pressure from rapid gunfire caused headaches and temporary deafness among crew members. Eastwood insisted on firing real blanks instead of miming shots to maintain recoil authenticity. During one take, the blank shell casings flew back and scorched his face. He kept going until Hutton called cut. That shot stayed in the final cut. The smoke fogging his face wasn't makeup, it was gunpowder residue. What audiences didn't know was that every bullet you see fired carried the sting of real combustion, and every flinch was genuine pain disguised as heroism. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because up next in fact number 10, we reveal the chaos that nearly shut the entire production down. What happened off camera was more explosive than what made it to theaters. Fact number 10. Halfway through production, disaster struck. A snowstorm buried the crew's equipment beneath 6 feet of ice overnight. Cameras froze, solid film reels cracked, and a generator short-circuited, starting a small fire inside the supply tent. Cast and crew were stranded on the mountain for nearly 48 hours with limited food. Clint Eastwood helped dig out equipment, while Burton sat inside a Jeep wrapped in blankets, sipping whiskey to stay warm. Director Brian Hutton refused to shut down the shoot, declaring that war wasn't meant to be comfortable. MGM panicked when they heard the crew had lost 3 days of footage, but miraculously the film survived. What audiences never realized was that the movie's white-knuckle realism came from genuine panic exhaustion and the bitter sting of survival. Fact number 9. The film's theme music by Ron Goodwin almost never made it into the final cut. MGM originally wanted a pop-style tune to appeal to younger audiences. Composer Ron Goodwin fought to keep his orchestral score, arguing that brass and drums were the heartbeat of war. He recorded the score in a single session with the London Symphony Orchestra, using overlapping percussion tracks to mimic the sound of choppers slicing air. The result became legendary, a rhythm of paranoia and courage that pulsed through every scene. Even Clint Eastwood admitted that the music turned gunfights into ballet. What audiences didn't know was that Goodwin's defiance in the recording booth gave Where Eagles Dare its pulse and prevented it from sounding like just another 60s adventure. Fact number 8. The film's plot twists were so complex that the cast received revised scripts daily. Pages were marked top secret and burned after shooting. To keep suspense real, director Hutton revealed betrayals only minutes before cameras rolled. Burton's shocked reaction when confronting the traitors was genuine. He didn't know which characters would turn until that morning. Clint Eastwood once joked that even the crew didn't know who the enemy was. This spontaneous secrecy gave the film its unique rhythm of mistrust and paranoia. Viewers felt disoriented, but so did the actors. What audiences never guessed was that confusion wasn't scripted. It was engineered. Every line, every glance, every hesitation was born from real uncertainty behind the camera. Fact number 7. During one night, shoot an avalanche almost ended the production. Explosives planted to simulate artillery fire triggered unstable snow on a nearby ridge. The rumble shook the mountain and buried part of the crew's equipment hut. No one was killed, but several technicians were trapped for hours. Eastwood personally helped dig them out, using a metal shovel with his bare hands blistered and bleeding by morning. The incident was quietly covered up to avoid negative press. MGM feared insurance cancellation, but the footage from that night made it into the final cut. The eerie silence before explosions wasn't added. Later, it was the real mountain holding its breath before chaos. What audiences saw as controlled destruction was nature answering back. Fact number 6. Richard Burton's wife, Elizabeth Taylor, visited the set and caused production to halt for nearly a day. Her arrival drew media swarms to the quiet Austrian valley. Burton was both delighted and distracted, and his drinking worsened that evening. Crew members recalled that Hutton canceled filming for 24 hours to keep paparazzi away. Taylor reportedly spent the night in Burton's chalet, reading the script aloud in mock accents and teasing him for his heroic role. Her glamour contrasted brutally with the freezing mountain conditions. The next morning, Burton arrived on set sober, serious, and emotionally raw. His delivery in the following interrogation scene was so intense that even Eastwood looked shaken. What audiences didn't know was that Taylor's brief visit reignited Burton's fire just in time. Fact number 5. While filming in the Austrian Alps, the crew discovered a sealed tunnel near the castle location that contained real wartime relics. Inside were rusted weapons helmets and propaganda leaflets from the Second World War. The Austrian authorities were alerted, but the film crew managed to photograph the find before it was sealed again. The eerie discovery unsettled everyone. The cast realized they were recreating scenes of war on the very soil that once saw real blood. Burton reportedly grew quiet that evening and toasted the unknown soldiers whose ghosts still haunted the mountain. What audiences never knew was that part of the film's haunting realism came not from set design, but from history itself, whispering beneath the snow. Fact number 4. The film's climactic jump from the cable car to the snow-covered roof was one of the riskiest practical stunts of the decade. Stuntman Alf Joint rehearsed for days, measuring wind speed and cable sway. During the actual take, a sudden gust threw him off balance and he slammed into the gondola wall, fracturing his ribs. Despite the injury, he finished the shot before collapsing in the snow. Director Brian Hutton called it the bravest thing he had ever seen. The footage stayed in the movie untouched. Every flinch and gasp was real. What audiences didn't know was that the sequence that thrilled millions nearly cost a man his life, and that pain was forever preserved on film. Fact number 3. A second unit mishap destroyed several reels of film mid-production. During transport from Austria to London, a customs officer left the reels near a heating vent, melting sections of the negatives. MGM considered reshooting key sequences, but the cost was too high. Instead, editors spliced damaged frames together by hand using backup takes. This rough texture ironically added to the movie's cold, gritty tone. Clint Eastwood joked that fate had given them a war-torn aesthetic. What audiences didn't realize was that the film's distinctive harsh contrast wasn't an artistic choice. It was an accident born of melted celluloid and improvisation under pressure. Every flicker of grain you see on screen is a scar left by disaster. Fact number 2. Clint Eastwood's silent demeanor wasn't entirely acting. He was deeply frustrated by Richard Burton's erratic behavior and the endless retakes. Demanded by the crew, Eastwood often isolated himself between scenes, refusing to rehearse more than once. Director Brian Hutton eventually realized the tension worked for the story. Schaffer's quiet stoicism and Burton's theatrical charisma clashed perfectly. Their mutual irritation became chemistry. The mistrust on screen was real. Eastwood later admitted he respected Burton, but found the chaos exhausting. What audiences never realized was that the film's gripping partnership was forged not in friendship, but in fatigue. Two men from opposite worlds locked in a performance that mirrored their own uneasy alliance. Fact number 1. Where Eagles Dare became one of the most expensive war films ever made in the 1960s, costing over $7 million. MGM executives feared it would sink the studio after several recent flops. Yet the film soared at the box office, turning into a global hit and redefining the espionage war genre. It wasn't just an action movie. It was a turning point showing that practical stunts and layered deception could coexist in one relentless spectacle. The studio expected a niche thriller. What they got was a cultural phenomenon that inspired everything from Mission Impossible to modern infiltration thrillers. The Eagles didn't just dare, they conquered. Bonus fact: the original ending was far darker. In the first script, Major Smith was meant to die during the escape, his final radio call fading into static. Richard Burton refused to film it, saying the audience needed one survivor to carry the story's weight. Director Hutton reluctantly changed it during the last week of shooting. The revised ending gave Smith and Schaffer their legendary final salute. The lost pages of that original script were never recovered after being burned for secrecy. What audiences never realized was that the hero we remember only lived because Burton defied the script. His instinct gave the film its immortal heartbeat. Where Eagles Dare remains more than a war adventure. It is a monument to endurance, deception, and raw courage, both on screen and behind the camera. Every frame hides frostbite, sweat, and fire. If you love uncovering the truth behind cinema's most dangerous productions, hit like and subscribe, because the next mission takes us even deeper into the chaos of classic filmmaking, where legends risked everything for one perfect shot.